It's part one of our episode with Matt Williams of NBC Sports Edge. Today, we'll recap and learn lessons from our recent expert leagues, including the Labor Mixed Auction and TGFBI. Beat the Shift is next. Welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always is Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Special midweek episode as we get down to the nitty-gritty of draft season. We are so glad that baseball is back. How have you been, Ruvain?
Been good. Been busy trying to keep up with all these transactions that are going on, and the first spring training game is only 2 days away. Probably when people listen to this, spring training will have started already.
Yeah, so excited for that. My head is spinning from all the transactions. I mean, wow. Fast and Furious, it's really exciting, I have to say, that you can't go a couple of hours without some big name being traded or signing. It's just Christmas in March, I guess. But the good news is baseball is back, so there you go.
Yep, and we keep refreshing Twitter to see what the next big trade or big signing is. It's great.
There you go. Well, we have a great episode today. We're going to do a little bit about talking about spring training. We're also going to recap some of our expert leagues. And with us today from NBC Sports Edge, you also write at The Athletic and as the host of the Turn 2 podcast. Welcome to the show, Matt Williams. How are you, Matt?
Hey, pretty good. Thanks for having me on the show, guys. I'm excited to talk baseball. Still, it can't believe that just over a week ago, there was still a lockout. And now all of a sudden, Reds fans just wish there was still a lockout.
Yeah.
Both Reds and both the Athletic supporters.
At least the Athletics fans saw this coming. We knew that the Reds, I think the fans didn't want to believe that this kind of fire sale was going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, at least the Reds and the Athletics had the 70s, right?
There you go. Well, we jump right into it here. And as we mentioned at the top, expert leagues. Last week, we participated in the mixed labor auction. I was there drafting with Ruvain. And Matt, you were in the auction as well. And I don't like to talk about our teams. Oh, I got this player. He's really great. My infield's great, but my outfield, it doesn't really help anybody. What I do want to get out of it is certain strategy elements to talk about what you did, what I did, and what we can learn, and things like that. So that is the purpose of going through this. And, but before we jump into that, what were your overall thoughts about our mixed labor auction and, your performance, and are you happy with your team results?
Yeah, I am. I'm very happy with the results. I want to build a balanced team, and in a snake draft, you can kind of what the ADP will be to a degree. People will, especially when you get into expert leagues or high stakes, you throw ADP out the window, but you still have an idea of how the flow of the draft's going, and there can only be so many players taken before you draft again. So you can have that a relatively different strategy. But an auction, I mean, you can get anybody you want, which is really why they're so fantastic. But my typical way of building a team, like death by 1,000 paper cuts, where I like to be very, very balanced. Everyone kind of wants the same players. Everyone wants the players with a little power and a little speed. So in this one, I knew I was going to have to be a little more, do things a little differently. And but I did have a plan that boxed me into doing a couple things I was uncomfortable with. But I knew that I had other, I spent a little more than I wanted to on a couple players, but I knew I had some cheaper options later. So overall, I love how it turned out.
All right, Ruvain, what are your thoughts on the league in general?
I thought it was actually a little bit tame. I was expecting for the top players to go for a lot higher. I was a little bit shocked by that. I was also a little bit surprised about the closers, that it actually went as if it was last year and there was no lockout, so I was pretty surprised with that. But I think we got pretty good deals on a lot of the players we wanted. We were trying to be very patient with what we did. We waited on the closer market. That's something that I've been preaching, and I know you're a little bit more for going after one of the top closers, but we actually waited, and we actually had one of the players who we talk about a lot on this podcast fall into our lap, and that's Jacob deGrom.
Yeah, interesting that we did get deGrom, and talking as an actuary here, being risk averse, Never thought I'd actually purchase Jacob deGrom, but the price was so good. Actually, a lot of the pitching prices I thought were good. This was, as Ruvain said, this was a very cold temperature room. And the most important thing that I can tell you, folks, is when you're doing an auction, you take the temperature of the room in the first 2 rounds. And if the temperature is cold, if superstars are not going for vastly overpriced, it probably means you should buy one. Because if it's overpriced and everybody's overpriced, there's going to be a whole middle ground, and there's going to be a whole slug of value somewhere in the low 20s, in the upper teens. That's going to be where the values are. But if the temperature is cold, if you don't get these $35, $40 players, you always get 1 or 2 there. But if you don't have a lot of people going there, the value is not going to be in the teens. The value is actually going to be in the upper 20s, low 30s, if you can snag some of those. So that's what we saw, and, you never know what's going to happen. We made our best guess as to what the market is going to do. I think it's very, very important to prepare market ADP. It's a little bit more complicated in auction, but it's worth doing just to know where you think the value is. And I think we guessed right in the hitting side. I think we were wrong in terms of what positions. I think we thought corner infield would be better to go higher, and middle infielder higher, and outfielder cheaper. And it was just the total reverse of where we saw the values were. But the pitching, we went right heavy. I mean, we went Zach Wheeler. Now, obviously, at the time, we didn't know about any shoulder issues or ramp-up issues, but we went deGrom, spent money. We got Rodon pretty early. We spent some money on pitching, and I think that was because we saw the pitching prices were low, and you got to jump on it right away. That's sort of the general gist of what I thought of the auction. Otherwise, our hitting is so super safe. We're very big on get the counting stats, get the playing time, just pick values, and the middle infield values in the teens. Oh my goodness, our middle infield, we got tremendous value. We have Javier Baez, Carlos Correa, Corey Seager, all for about $15 a piece on average, which is phenomenal to get that kind of star power in the middle. But again, it's see where the values are, and don't be patient. Always, never overpay. Be patient and let the values come to you. But of course, get some of those higher values if it's a cold temperature room. Otherwise, you won't be able to get those middle. I said a lot there. Any of that make sense, Matt?
Sorry, I didn't know you were directing that at me. Yeah, in general, I mean, the idea is to typically always be patient. It doesn't always happen that way, especially like you said, the way this draft went, it wasn't the players that I thought would go for cheaper and expensive. It was a little backwards, but I think the more important thing is to still, you still want to be getting to certain thresholds as far as your own projections for the categories. Because in the end, after the draft ends, the prices mean absolutely nothing. You, regardless of how much you pay, you want to make sure you get the actual stats you need out of the players you are acquiring. But everything you said is definitely the best way to go about it. I went a little, I don't want to say stars and scrubs. I did that with my pitching more like that. We'll get to my team in a little, probably in the next few questions here, but I took Garrett Cole because my whole thing is I wanted one of the few guys that I thought were safe. And then I was just going to wait because there was tons of pitching that were inexpensive. I knew I could get even for $1. I ended up just supplanting him with Trevor Rogers and Eduardo Rodriguez. And I was very happy with that top 3. And I knew there was a ton of other pitchers I could fill in, especially in a league with waivers. So, I just got Cole and kind of went with whatever felt to me there. As far as, hitting, there was a few things I wanted to make sure I got out of there as far as Cedric Mullins and Luis Robert. I just wanted to get a couple of power and speed guys there. And the rest of the way, a lot of the moderate power and speed guys were going for quite a lot, which is, what actually led to me spending a little more on Manny Machado, just because he was one of the last third basemen to go, which we'll get into in a little bit probably also. But, he was, we'll get to it in a little bit. So, we'll get into the specifics of my team. But overall, I agree with your assessment of, you want to let the values come to you. But at a certain point, if you have a build in mind, you do need to keep in mind where the statistics are available at the players that are left. If you had somehow missed out on certain options at a position, you got to know what kind of statistics are left on the board, how much risk comes with them. And then, if push comes to shove, you just have to spend some extra money.
And it's also knowing the room because we knew a lot of people who were drafting that we've drafted with them before, so we know who certain managers want to have on their team. Like we know that Jeff Zerman wants a certain type of pitcher. He likes the closers or he likes the middle, like we do also. So that comes an advantage also. And we've spoken about this in the past about knowing your competition. This is sort of like a home league. If you've played in this league a couple of times, you see the same players over and over again. You know what they're going to go for. You know who's going to go stars and scrubs, and you know basically how to balance your team based on how other teams are picking during the course of the draft.
Yeah, a lot of the plan was because we do know, as Ruven said, some of the players, and you don't want to make a plan in the spaces that other people tend to play. Obviously, there's 11 other teams, so you can't be perfect there, but, you have to be cognizant of who's going to get where. I didn't set up the league, by the way, but this is a 12-team mixed league, standard 5x5 positions and scoring categories, short bench, 5 players, unlimited IL, but the fab is $100 only, and it's $1 minimum, so you do have to watch some of the fab. I want to ask a couple questions about your team to highlight certain strategy differences you might have had with me. So here we go. Closers. You bought Edwin Diaz as your main closer. Small premium, not a ridiculous price, $21. And then you bought a relatively inexpensive Kimbrel, $3, who doesn't have a team right now, and that's pretty much it. In a 12-team mixed league, by my calculations, you pretty much need about 3 closers, or at least 2.5, to really be viable. You don't really have that. And I'm not trying to mock you here. I'm trying to get the information as to why you set that up. I'm assuming that you're going to have to spend some waiver wire capital on fab to get savers in the middle of the season. Does that mean that you think that it is easier and more efficient to do so? I just want to get a sense of what that strategy was all about. Maybe that wasn't your plan, or maybe it was. What say you about the closers?
Yeah, I mean, it's 12-team league, so I mean, there's just going to be like a monstrous amount of talent on the waiver wire. Edwin Diaz, I wanted to get one of the top 4, 5 closers. I don't count like Aroldis Chapman in there. Emmanuel Clase scares me a little bit. So there's only a couple that I was really interested in getting. So Diaz was one of them. A couple of the big ones are already off the board, so I wanted to grab him. Craig Kimbrel, I mean, he's going to be a closer no matter what. I know Tony La Russa comes out and says, I plan on him being on the team. What else is he going to say? He's on the team now. They've added so many pieces this offseason. He's gone. I mean, he's gone. If he's not traded, I will eat my own hat. He's a closer. And then after that, I took Devin Williams for like $1. Josh Hader is always rumored to be being traded. In this season, with the amount of, or lack thereof, of quality left-handers on the market, and for how much teams could be spending, I really do expect Hader to be traded. That's obviously a risk, but for me, I spent a lot of money on a couple players early. I had to go cheap, so for me, I just had to try to take the cheaper route at the end. And if Hader gets traded, I have a top 5 closer in Devin Williams. If he doesn't, then I'll have to be aggressive on the waiver wire, which isn't ideal. But again, it's not a 15-team league. I should be able to figure something out. I could easily fish in the San Diego or Seattle pond, and or Tampa Bay, and end up pulling some out of there. That's not ideal, but I'll probably have to be aggressive on the waiver wire to get someone I like, and try to take maybe a couple of stabs here. I didn't want to necessarily do that on my bench in the snake draft version of this one, in the because we auction off all starters, and then you snake draft for the bench, and I wanted to take a couple of risks there on some players that I would need a lot more, rather than just like completely strike out on guessing on a closer. So that's kind of the idea I had. I'm very comfortable with Kimbrel, and Devin Williams is a gamble, but regardless, he'll be useful for me anyway.
Okay, so that was the plan pretty much, and you pretty much stuck to it. So I guess success on your end, right?
Yeah, I would have. I've bid on a couple of like the cheaper options there, but again, I kind of hamstrung myself a little earlier, which is something you don't want to do. So I couldn't really afford to go the extra couple of dollars on a couple of the cheaper guys. But again, there was no one I really loved at the back end. So yeah, we'll see. I mean,
right. And was that because you spent $35 on Cole, that it was a budget issue on the pitching end?
No, actually ended up being,
Okay.
we'll get to this. I spent 37 on Machado, who,
Okay.
again, he was one of the last third basemen who were put up that I considered a startable option. And I got into a bidding war with Jeff Zimmerman, who desperately needed him. I think his starting third baseman right now is Evan Longoria, if I'm not mistaken, because he has Chris Bryant in his outfield. So I knew power and speed. He was a perfect fit for my team. I knew I had some cheaper options later I like for pitching. So I decided that was a better move for my team to spend the extra couple of dollars there. It cost me later not being able to maybe secure a third pitcher with a clearer path to saves, but I still prefer the method I went because I'll have to go on the waiver wire and I'll have to get a relief pitcher, but it's okay. I don't mind.
So, all right. So on our end, Ruvain, so our plan, of course, is always to get some saves. And, we discussed before the actual auction that we think that the value is not in the top. And I know I was advocating for getting a top closer, but we thought that they were too expensive. And we were going to go middle. Our options range in sort of the bargain, not the bargain bucket, the middle bucket of Corey Knebel, Taylor Rogers, Blake Trinan. And actually, we bought all three. I thought at a pretty reasonable price. We got Knebel at 10, we got Rogers at 8, and Trinan at 6. So $24 for two closers, one who currently has the job if Jansen signs elsewhere. Tell us about what you thought there. And by the way, we also bought Gregory Soto in the snake round. So technically, we have 4 potential closers of the team. I guess you have to say, Ruvain, we executed that exactly as planned. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we did. However, we were trying. I think Matt was the one who beat us out on Edwin Diaz. We actually were thinking about having Edwin Diaz as our main closer because we were trying to do that. But when we saw his price get to where it was, we started to pivot, and that's when you have to be able to change and you have to be able to have a backup plan in case these things don't work out. So that's why we got Corey Knebel, and Corey Knebel looks like he will be the closer. So that for $10, I'll take the closer on the Phillies. That's a no-brainer. Blake Trinan, just like Devin Williams, they're good middle relievers. So even if they're not closing, they'll get you good ratios, they'll get you strikeouts, and there's always a possibility that they will save. And then you're talking about getting Gregory Soto at the end. You have Taylor. Gregory Soto is a dart because I really don't want to have to play him if we don't have to because his ERA and whip are god-awful. But you also have Taylor Rogers, who until he eventually he'll also get traded. He's a good saves option as well. And just to have those in early on to try to get as many saves guys in there early to get the saves early, because when they're named closer, they're closer for at least a month, maybe more, depending on their pedigree. And you'll get to keep those saves. Even if they get traded, you'll still get to keep those saves. And the way the room was going, I think we got the best value where we were, only because the top guys again were very expensive, like the Edwin Diaz and the Liam Hendricks. They're just too out of our ballpark because we're trying to fit a budget. And Matt, you mentioned about the third base. We actually got screwed over at third base also. We have Justin Turner as our starting third baseman. So we were trying to go for Manny Machado, but again, we set our limits and we made sure not to go over those limits because if we would have spent that money on Manny Machado, we would not have gotten the other players that we wanted.
Yeah, no, I mean it's your method is it's two ways to go about it. At me, I wanted to put something on the board, and I knew in a 12-team league, I'm pretty comfortable with my player analysis, especially you get some players in season as well. So I figured, all right, I'm just going to get the guys I want, get my rock solid base, and then the rest of it I try to figure out. It's definitely a risk. But again, I wanted to, have a little fun with this league too, and I'm confident in my ability to pick them up. So yeah, your strategy was definitely solid, but it's just two ways to go about it. Either you want to go safe and make sure that you're not weak anywhere, or I decided to kind of fill in a little more at the top and take a shot on some people at the bottom.
Right.
I want to talk about the Manny Machado thing.
Yep.
Now, you bought him for 37. I have to imagine on your value sheet you did not have him anywhere near 37. Am I right?
No, I have him at like 32.
Okay, all right. Well, that's not a ridiculous overpay. I mean, we had him in the 20s, but but even that's a $5 overpay on your value sheet. The question to you is, obviously, we know why you did it, because it was at a point, not many players left. You probably had the money to do it, and you wanted a good third baseman. Totally understand the why. Question is, how do you know when you need to drop out of a bidding war. Like, how do you know, okay, I can't go more than $5 over value? Like, there's got to be a point where you say, that's ridiculous, or now I'm losing value in my team. Now I'm throwing out money. I'll just drop to $1. Like, how do you know the breaking point of what you have to do?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, you have to know what your plan is for the rest of your roster, and you have to know the rest of the player pool available in order for you to do that. So for me, I was comfortable at that point where I saw that, what the available inventory at third base was and what I had available to me to, if I lost Machado, how I would make up for that in the other positions. And I didn't think I had that. I mean, I ended up spending very little on the last couple of, I had Conforto, Ian Happ, Max Kepler. I spent like nothing on those three, and me spending extra money in the outfield to make up for losing a Manny Machado actually wasn't going to happen for me. And again, I was comfortable waiting late on pitching. So, and a couple of the top catchers were already off the board. So there was no, the best path for me to building the team I wanted was to secure Machado. So I just had to, in that instance, go above the extra $5 completely because it was the best fit for my team. If it was like earlier in the draft, I definitely would have, if he was one of the first third basemen. I don't love Manny Machado. He's not like a $37 player to me. I wouldn't even have gone there. But again, it's a position where I don't think it's as desolate as some make it out to be. There's plenty of late options I think are very intriguing, but it's definitely the position that lacks safety. And I kind of wanted to get one of those. And especially in the instance where even some of my late targets were already missing, Machado just made sense for me. But yeah, to reiterate my answer to your question. Yeah, you have to know when you're bidding on a player, if you were to lose him or if you were to overpay, can you make that, can you make the rest of your team work? And if you were to lose out on him, can you use that money you didn't spend to make up for that loss in other positions? And yeah, in this instance, I felt I had to spend the extra few dollars and I just had to secure him.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I disagree with that strategy of you need to pay $5 over. I'm not saying I'm exactly like Larry Schechter where you can't go a penny over, but I think $5 is quite a bit of an overpay.
Well, here's what I meant by when the draft is over, the values mean nothing, and I really mean that is me missing out on Manny Machado and ending up with Evan Longoria. That extra $5 wasn't going to make up the difference between the two anywhere else. If I didn't spend the $5 on Machado and I spent the extra $5 on any other position to upgrade it or upgrade a couple, I don't think I could have made up that difference.
Okay, sure. I mean, obviously, if you're going to upgrade somebody with an extra $5, upgrading somebody at the Manny Machado level is a lot better than upgrading, one of your fourth outfielder for $5 more. You're not getting that much better player, but of course the $5 extra for Machado you are. I just think that overspend is a lot. I think that mathematically, $5 in order to win an auction, you got to come out really positive. You have to have positive profit, and when you're taking a $5 hit, it's hard to make that up. Sure, your bottom outfield slots are excellent. You got a $1 Max Kepler. That's going to a couple bucks profit. Ian Happ, $1.02 profit. Conforto, it's hard to make up plus gain at the same time. So, my limit, I would say to people, is probably about $3 at the top level. Somewhere in the middle, we're talking about $2, $1. You can do it once. You can do it once in an auction. Maybe that's the one thing that you had, is that's the one guy you did. Repeating that obviously doesn't work. So, maybe, it has to do with the money that you had at that time and it made sense for you. I try to.
It entirely depends on the circumstances and when you do it. Normally I would agree with you in a general sense, but I said it entirely, the example I said about spending the extra money is, like I said, like Machado to Longoria, is the production, again, forgetting the actual value in which you paid for him. The production I'm getting in Machado versus Longoria, the gap between those two players, if I spent that extra $5 if I didn't spend it on Machado and I dropped to Longoria, that extra money I don't think I could have made up in another position, is basically what I'm saying. But yeah, typically I would agree with you. But in the end, once you're into the auction and so many players are off the board, then it becomes a matter of more of how do I get to the end goal of the statistics I want to get on the board. rather than how much money I have to get them, because I might have very different values than the rest of everyone. I have ideas
Sure.
of people I can maybe get cheaper, because at a certain point, there was a lot of outfielders on the board, and it just looked like, all right, I'm definitely going to be able to get some cheap outfielders and starting pitching at the end of this draft, and I can
Right.
start filling out mentally in my head some different spots where I'll definitely be able to spend way under what I think I have to, and so I just that you just make the quick math in your head and decide, all right, I can do something a little unorthodox here, and make something that I think fills out the roster a little better.
Right. Anything to add, Ruvain?
Yeah, I don't have an issue with him going $5 over as long as you're able to balance your budget the rest of the way. So if you took that money out, if you took it from somewhere because you budgeted, let's say $32 for Machado, if you took it out from someplace else, you just had to make sure that you allocated the rest of your money elsewhere during the course of the draft, so you wouldn't shortchange at another spot because you had to do the overspend. That's all.
Yeah. So, a lot of things do come out there. And again, I'm not trying to criticize. I'm just trying to say that my method is value, and I'm very, very hesitant to ever do that. You had what's it called? You had Rafael Devers. He went for 32. I value Devers more than Machado, not that much more, but to pay $5 more, I could have gone to 33 for Devers.
I think that's the thing. I don't necessarily care. I definitely don't care about what other people are spending. I care about what I'm spending in order to get what I think I need to put myself in a position to win. So I don't necessarily care what the
Devers went earlier though, I think. So I
Oh,
think you
very
said
early. One of the first
Machado was like the last one up there.
Yeah,
So if
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah.
and you're desperate and you get in the heat of the moment, you end up spending the extra dollar or two, especially on an online auction. When you're in person, I think it may have been a little bit different. You may have been been a little bit calmer. But when you get in the heat of the moment, you're like, there's nobody left. I got it. You know what? Just one more dollar. You know what? Fine. Let me try to beat him out by one more dollar. And then all of a sudden it turns out to $5.
Yeah. And, here's a lesson also. It's an economics lesson that if you are the last, if you really do want Machado from the get-go, and he is the last third baseman out, and especially if it's late, that price is going to be inflated, as you saw here. So if you really do want Machado from the start, it's really incumbent on you to nominate him much earlier so that you don't have to pay the 5 over. You might have to pay 2 over, but you're going to be artificially inflated. I mean, obviously, you would have loved to pay 34 instead of 37, and I think that because it came out that late, you were forced to do that. So the suggestion I'm saying is, nominate some people that you might need a little bit earlier if it's part of your plan. Otherwise, you might get artificially inflated.
I should add, I'm not in love with Manny Machado. He wasn't even a target of mine. It's just the way. Honestly, if it wasn't for, I was in a bidding war with one person, Jeff Zimmerman. Me and him are probably like hating that the other person existed at that exact moment. If he had like secured like one other person earlier, it was also a timing thing where, again, I wasn't in a bidding war necessarily with several people. At a certain point, once it got to like the $29 range, it was just me and Jeff going back and forth. So there was that as well. So it wasn't necessarily he wasn't necessarily even a target of mine. It's just the way
Right.
the way the draft went.
Talk a little bit about nominations here. And what I did notice, and I always look to see what people are doing for nomination. We'll get to what Jeff did in a minute, but what you did is you nominated players, and you actually didn't buy any player that you nominated other than Jeimer Candelario for $4 somewhere towards the end. Was it
I
your
actually regret that, by the way, more than Machado. when I
The
when I
four?
spent $4 for Candelaria, I was like, God, why did I bother doing
Yeah. Well, in any case, the question though is, was it your strategy not to nominate players that you wanted to buy? Were you trying to get money off the board? You also nominated a lot of speed players. I saw Mondesi or Rosarina were your first 2 nominations. Pretty soon after that, Miles Straw. Were you trying to test speed? Just trying to get into the mind of what your nomination strategy was.
Not really. I don't necessarily even consider Rosarina a big speed guy. I mean, he went out of his way to steal like 5 or 6 bases in the last week to get to that threshold he did. I put up Mondesi because I absolutely wanted nothing to do with him, and I thought that there could be a couple of players that were maybe basing their draft strategy around acquiring him. So I thought, we'll get one massive player off the board, and I'll get an idea of, the rest of the landscape in stolen bases. Rosarina is just a player I have no interest in as well. I know some people like the ceiling. I literally wouldn't have bid a couple, I wouldn't have bid half of what he went for, because I think that there is this massive floor. I think that with his plate discipline, he really could end up being like a platoon player. It is the Rays after all. So I just wanted nothing to do with him at all. So it wasn't even necessarily getting speed off the board. It was just, I more or less like, getting rid of a couple players I know I won't need. I did bid on quite a few guys that I put up, but, in general terms, this draft, I didn't put up too many people that I had like my heart set on.
Ruben, we definitely don't do that, right?
No, I mean, well, actually, this draft we did it a little because our first two picks we had Wheeler and we had DeGrom, so
Right.
we had no, and we weren't expecting that. That was not part of our plan coming into the draft, not at all. What we did want to do is wanted to test the market for the players that we wanted initially. And once we did that, we started just nominating pitchers, the high price pitchers, because we didn't need that. And we needed the money to come off the board. So the offensive guys that we wanted, the prices would come down. We're trying to manipulate the market that way by trying to make the pitching more pricey, get them off the board, get the money off the board, and then we were able to jump in and get the deals on offense. I think that's sort of what we did, I believe.
Yeah. What you want to do in an auction, I think, is that you want to be, in terms of dollars, somewhere in the middle. I like even being a little bit at having more money than most, but you definitely don't want to be down. If we've spent $50 very early on two pitchers, we were not getting another $25 pitcher. So we were in a position to wait a little bit on hitting prices to come down, and we definitely weren't going to play in the top pitcher prices. So at that point, we were nominating players we didn't want, particularly pitchers. But in general, I think it does pay to mix it up. At some point, as I mentioned before, the information of, hey, we want Machado. Well, we have to put him out now, or he's going to go too high. And the information is important for nominations, and I generally like nominating players I want more than not. But of course, if you're buying players, you want to get that money down. So everything you have to be prepared for. Speaking of nominations, Jeff Zimmerman, I knew, and I don't know if you know Jeff in auctions, he always nominates designated hitters, the utility guys first. He wants to clog people's things up, and usually they go for a discount early. I'm sorry, they usually go for a discount if they come up later in the auction, but that's why he wanted to get rid of the bargain early. So Franmil Reyes, for example, which I love Franmil Reyes this year, but I was not prepared to spend $15 for him. I was hoping for like a $10 sneaky purchase, but he came out in one of the first three rounds because Jeff Zimmerman nominated Ohtani, Franmil Reyes, and Nelson Cruz. I told Ruvain during it, he's going to nominate one of those three, and I didn't know what order, but he nominated those three. But you're the one of the guys who bought him. You bought Franmil Reyes, which I have no problem putting him in a utility slot. You bought him at $15. Did you like the price, and what are your thoughts for Franmil Reyes in general?
I did. I had no plans to get Franmil Reyes in this draft. I had him priced, I think at like 18. I love him. I think there's, you can always say that he's a small adjustment away from being a monster. I like him the way he is. 254 with 30 home runs last year. I think he's definitely he's definitely a 40 home run bat. With an adjustment, he's a 50 home run bat. So I know as for myself, I tend to draft such a balanced team. Again, I said the death by 1,000 paper cuts. I love to get guys with little power and little speed and just build like an entire team like that. I knew it wasn't going to go that way, and I always end up being a little light on power. It's just the way that I know I draft. So I thought, all right, I have this guy priced up at a couple of dollars. It's right in the beginning here. I can secure a fantastic power hitter, in my opinion, put him right on my board so I can kind of draft the rest of the draft the way I'm comfortable doing with the kind of players I want to, and knowing that I've kind of already put a ton of power on the board. So yeah, usually in a snake draft, I wouldn't want to throw you don't like to fill up your utility too much, but in this one where I knew I had the ability to do whatever I wanted. I kind of like putting him up there because there's obviously a lot of power late, but I thought in this room, the guys that I would have interest in, like the trendy guys later, they're not going to go necessarily for cheaper. So here I saw a guy I liked go that happened to be priced a few dollars under where I actually had him valued, and I just decided to just put him on the board.
And Matt, you know what? We're in the same TGFBI league. Guess who has Framil Reyes in that league? I do.
You got him?
I do. So I agree with you with Framil Reyes, and you have to get him at the right price. And I thought he was valued at the right price. You had the fourth pick in the TGFBI. Mine was six. I'm sure if Framil made it back around, you probably would have grabbed him there.
Yeah, I definitely like Fremel a lot. People love to discount the utility only, but I think he goes late enough. And I think I'm confident enough in what he's going to bring me where I'm very happy to add him.
Yeah. And to highlight a point that you made, if you see yourself in general in drafts not getting enough power, to tilt a little bit more towards power is a good thing. I think that, everyone has their own strengths and you play to them. And if your weakness is not getting enough power, that's definitely a policy that you should do, is tilt a little bit more. Same thing with hitter versus pitcher. If you're better at pitchers, maybe tilt a little bit more towards hitters so that, you compile a better team from that, and you'll weasel yourself into a better team on your strength. So,
well, here's one thing we were talking about earlier. This actually ties back to the Manny Machado discussion, where I tied in Franmil, and I usually like to go again, little power and little speed with the other guys. I got Cedric Mullins. I actually got him a little cheaper than I thought he would, but I don't think he's a 30-30 player. I think he's going to regress, but I still like what he's going to give me. So I have him, and then I have Robert, little power, little speed. Kepler, power, little speed. Ian Happ, power, little speed. Gene Segura, same thing. Trevor Story, Ryan McMahon, a little speed, a little power. And I didn't really get like any big boppers. So again, when it came down to third base, where I got this guy who could give me 30 home runs and some speed, it just made sense for me because again,
right.
I ended up going a little light on power the rest of the way. I mean, I'm pretty balanced. I don't have anyone giving me I don't have any of the Miles Straw type, 0 home, 0, 1, 2, 3 home run guys. The lowest power guy I have is like Christian Vasquez. But that's just another thing. It's just I know the way I draft, and I know how I'm. Sometimes it's going to be tough for me to make up certain things because I tend to lean certain directions.
Yeah, and he fit your roster, and sometimes the statistics, the way it fits in your roster is also worth the extra buck as well. So I'm sure that factored in. Let's talk about catchers. You went two $2 catchers, Carson Kelly, Christian Vasquez. Those are not bottom of the barrel catchers when you have two catchers to take, but they're certainly not stars, and you certainly spent $4, which is, the minimum you can spend is $2, so you spent the extra dollar on each to get them. Wondering, was that your plan on thoughts? And I do like the fact that you put the 2, because you can actually get a much better catcher if you just go to the 2 rather than the 1. So you might as well do the extra dollar,
Early, I actually thought the elite catchers went for way too cheap, at least where actually I had them priced. I know you have to see what the room is doing and no reason to spend over what you have to when there's a lot of, if no one else is going to. But I really tried to get JT Realmuto, and I couldn't get my bid button to work, but it was just an isolated incident, user error on my part. So I didn't get him. So I actually tried to acquire there. And then at the towards the end where I was kind of saving my money to get a couple, spend the extra couple of bucks so I can get like the Eduardo Rodriguez of the world on my pitching staff at a certain price. I just wanted to make sure I got a couple of catchers I liked. I knew Christian Vasquez is someone I wanted to kind of get because I love that he kind of gives you that sneaky power. I think that him last year was kind of, a little bit of anomaly for how lackluster his entire line was. I expect him to bounce back to a degree. So I liked him at $2. And Carson Kelly came up, and it could have been one of a few different options. Someone bid him for $1. I was hoping to get him, and I knew he increased his barrel rate to over 8%. I think that he's going to have a nice year, healthy for the Diamondbacks. So I expect to bounce back, to a degree. There'll still be a terrible team, but I think that he was just one of those guys I liked. So if I could just get him for $2, I'll lock up my 2 catchers and move on, because after the certain top 7 or 8 catchers are down, I can really make an argument for the rest of the guys, the next 10 in any order. If I knew Mitch Garver was going for 4, I probably would have maybe readjusted my thoughts and tried to nail him down. But in general, I just wanted to grab a couple of catchers I was happy with for $2 each. So I'm happy with where I went. Obviously, like I said, with the Mitch Garver type situations, I would have rather, obviously gotten him for $2 more if I could have, but crystal ball, don't have it.
Yeah. Well, with Mitch Garver, I think it was our mistake that we didn't nominate him earlier. Not because I think we were going to get him, because I know that Ray Murphy really likes Mitch Garver. And I think that $4 for him probably would have been like $8 if we nominated him early and people had money to bid on him.
Yeah, even where he went, I actually expected him to go for more.
Yeah. So, but again, that was one guy that if you know a guy really likes somebody, sometimes you nominate him early and you can get the money off the board. Obviously, there are other priorities to nominate, so we didn't really focus on bidding up Ray Murphy in particular, but I'm noticing that phenomenon. Our plan, which we stuck to, really worked, and I think our catcher situation moving was great. We got Yasmani Grandal for $8, Gary Sanchez for $2.
That was a steal, by the way. It was such a steal.
$8 was a really big steal. We valued him probably around $13, $14. By our estimation, the sweet spot of the best price catchers were not at the Realmuto level. It was at the Grandal Contreras, and we were prepared to get anybody who fell roughly $10 to $12. Grandal fell to us at $8, so we were like, wow, that's pretty good. And that's the way we played it, and we're going to go cheap. Again, I like the $2 play because then you're not getting $1. The dollar ones go really, really deep. Just spending that extra dollar affords you to get something much better. So we budgeted $2, and at that point we got Gary Sanchez. Take a shot at him. Do I like him? Not really, but sure, $2. What the heck? Makes sense, Ruvain, right?
Yeah, that's basically what happened. The only thing is that Jeff Zimmerman threw a monkey wrench there. After he nominated the designated hitters, he got 2 catchers. He got JT Realmuto and he got Wilson Contreras. So then he started nominating all the catchers, and he was triggering the catcher market. So maybe that's why we got our Yasmani Grandal cheaper, just because it was still relatively early on in the draft, and people didn't want to spend on catcher. They wanted to spend elsewhere because everyone is seeing how their team shapes up, and they see, you know what, I can wait. I can get the $2 catcher later, just like Matt, just like you did. If you didn't get the top guy, you know what, why am I going to spend for a middle guy? Or if I just miss the middle guy, let me just stay at the bottom, because it's a 2-catcher league, 12 teams. You could drop the second catcher if they're not doing well. You can just churn the second catcher. You don't need to spend money there. You can spend money elsewhere.
Yeah, getting 2 top catchers I'm not in love with in this type of format. Jeff Zimmerman did that. He spent $33 to get Realmuto and Contreras, which those are excellent catchers. I think the values on them were great, but it's a lot of money invested in catcher, and catchers aren't the greatest commodity there. And of course, if one gets hurt, the replacement level is a much bigger drop than any other position. So putting 2 people in the same, it's a lot more risk to take from a profile risk perspective. But there you go. Just to wrap up this labor discussion. Any regrets? What you would have done differently, perhaps, Matt? I will say though that maybe I was slow, or I was trying to push it, but Matt Olson at 19 was. I thought I pressed it more, and I'm like, what? Did that just go for 19? That was like a what? What the heck just happened there? That was a regret that we didn't push the extra $1, especially since we were going to go heavy on corner infield, or at least on one corner infielder. And the other price, I thought Bichette went very, very cheap. I thought I was predicting it to go a lot higher, and being that the room was so cold, probably should have gone to 36 on Bichette. Little bit of a regret on that, but otherwise I don't really have any regrets. What about you?
Hindsight being 2020, I wish I would have just bought Jose Ramirez.
Yeah,
yeah, that would have been the way to go. But overall, not too bad. I mean, I think in the end, I like what I did. I probably wish I could have. I probably would have split Garrett Cole into upgrading. Like, I have Drew Rasmussen on my team. I probably would have taken that spot in Cole and maybe split that into 2. Maybe spend that money on 2 different pitchers. But other than that, I'm very happy. I'm very balanced. I like where I'm at, but that would be probably the only thing that I would have changed up.
All right, let's talk a little bit about TGFBI. You two, Ruvain and Matt, are in the same league number 1. A bunch of big hitters in that one. I don't want to go through the whole team, but I do want to point out if there are any trends. What kind of trends did you gather from there? Anything that we can share with the audience that might help them in their drafts going into their in the next month in whatever their leagues right now.
Man, not really. You just have to. It's funny. Me and Ruben, we both third base both dried up for us in this particular league too. I drafted Ryan McMahon, wanting to start him at middle infield. I ended up with him drafting Luis Arias literally just to have the position eligibility, and then grab JD Davis late purely because I think he's going to be traded and get some at bats somewhere else. But yeah, overall, the draft kind of went in fairly standard. It was very, very slow moving. But yeah, nothing really out of the ordinary in this one. The top closers all kind of went early, like it happens in most drafts. Nothing really out of the ordinary here at all, to be honest.
You were very high on Akil Baddoo, I say.
I love Baddoo. Some people don't like him. I see a guy that was a Rule 5 draft pick that didn't play like above like A ball before jumping up into the major leagues, and he held his own. And then of course the league adjusted to him because wasn't very experienced, but he really improved his plate discipline down the stretch, which is huge. So I think he comes out the year. He's not without risk, but he is someone that I think could definitely take the jump into that next level. Could be like a 25-25 guy. So in a league like TGFBI where you're shooting kind of for the overall, not that there's a problem with like trying to win your own league, but you are trying to like shoot for the moon a little bit in an overall situation. I'll take a risk and grab my guys. I've done my research, and maybe if this was a standalone, big money league, I wouldn't have maybe taken a risk like that. But in this kind of situation where you're shooting for an overall crown, I like Baddoo a lot. So I'll take the shot there. I don't think he was going to be coming back to me if I passed on him there, because I think, where I got him, there was plenty of people in my league that I knew had an interest in him. So I knew and my work is out there for everyone to see. So that everyone knows I like Baddoo, at least most people. So I just decided I just had to grab him there. But yeah, big fan of Baddoo.
Okay. Ruvain, what about you? Any trends or any information to gather? And I know that, you had a couple of big decisions in the middle of the auction, actually at the top of the auction. Maybe you can speak to some of the logic behind some of those.
Yeah, this was a very non-draft draft that I never really do ever. I went pitcher to start, which is very not me. I've been doing fantasy baseball for over 15 years. I've never done it in any league whatsoever. But I picked Garrett Cole with number 6, and then coming back to me, Max Scherzer was available, Jacob deGrom was available, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? I can't leave such a high value. We valued Max Scherzer very high, so I either leave that value on the board, let someone else get Max Scherzer, or I go with a hitter because I didn't have any hitters yet, and it was coming back to me, and I was nervous about getting speed because you always want to get speed in the first couple of rounds. So I was thinking either Max Scherzer or Tim Anderson. So I actually chose, and I went with my gut, and that's what I want to go with this. I said when I was talking this through to Ariel, I'm like, when this happened, I said, what should I do? I have no idea what to do. And he said, well, you can go this way, you can go that. And in the end, I said, you know what? Let's take the risk. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go with Max Scherzer, and you know what? Tim Anderson came back to me. So if I thought he was gonna come back to me based on the room, with the draft, I'm number 6, and it was going back to me, going the other way toward 1, and I saw that most of the people there had steals already. And if they had steals already, I was trying to count down. Okay, this person has steals. This stolen base is gonna be off the board. This stolen base is gonna be off the board, and I think it's possible that Tim Anderson may still get back to me, and it did, and I got very lucky with that. Another thing that I never do, and I did it here, I drafted Byron Buxton. I don't like injury risks, and he's always an injury risk, and I'm like, you know what? Let's try it. I need some more stolen bases because I had the 2 pitchers on top. I wanted to make sure I got some stolen bases, and then toward the end of the draft, just like Matt, you said, the third base was just I ended up with Alec Bohm as my third baseman, which I just didn't like. So what I did toward the end of the draft, I bulked up on a whole bunch of other possible third basemen, and I can just play whoever's hot. I got Isaac Kiner for Lefa. I got Yandy Diaz, who's eligible at third. I got Wilmer Flores, who's eligible at third. I got, I think, Hunter Dozier may be eligible at third. I'm not sure about that. So all these guys, I can just plug them in case my third baseman doesn't work out, because I knew that was my weakest spot, so I just worked on it. And I think that's how you should go about looking when you go into a draft. If you see you have a weak spot early on, try to address it later in the draft, because if you can do that, you won't be searching the waiver wire as much. Because if I didn't pick those guys, I'm going to be looking the whole time for a third baseman on the waiver wire, and I just know it, especially if Alec Bohm doesn't, he showed power this today, but it's just spring training, doesn't mean anything yet. And you know what? I want to have a well-rounded team. And it turned out that because I took 2 pitchers to start, the whole configuration of my team was different than what I imagined, because I had to plan differently just because of the 2. It threw me off my game completely. Just put it that way.
Yeah, you have to be prepared to go with what the room gives you and take the values of what they give you. Probably also the fact that you were in the middle mattered, because in the middle you can swoop up value a little bit better than at the back end, where you really do have to take the statistics above all else. For me, I think that the messages here are catchers are very, very priced up. In my league, you couldn't go outside of the top 3 rounds without the top 3 catchers. You have to pay for these catchers this year, just so you know, and that is going to filter out to your home leagues. Maybe not to this extent, but it will be. Pitchers going in the last 3 years, the theme very early, 8 pitchers in the first 2 rounds. Home leagues, I don't expect you to see that craziness, but you are going to have to pay relative to what it was 4 or 5 years ago. Closers are pushed up, as we've seen. They probably won't be pushed up as much as we get a couple more signings, and as home teams aren't the crazy DCs that a lot of this ADP is made up of. But closers are going higher than they used to, and you can debate whether it's right or not. In my TGFBI 4th round, I decided to take Raisel Iglesias because I'm not confident with the closer situation all over the place, and I grabbed Taylor Rogers later. I grabbed Lou Trevino late. I also took shots on 1 or 2 other closers just for the heck of it, but I did think it was important to get the closer, and I had to take him because he was going to be taken in the next couple of picks anyways.
One thing too, I mean, it had a lot to do with the with this being an overall, like I already said, but I am also a big fan of taking. A lot of people don't do this. Reuven used the back half of his draft great to fill in needs that he just had. Like you said, he plugged in the third base as well as he could. But I love if you're happy with where you're at, I love taking those last spots to not necessarily throw up guaranteed at bats if there's a waiver situation, if you have waivers and you can fix it. I just took a bunch of dart throws that of players I liked. Like I have Carlos Carrasco in the 22. If he's healthy, he looked healthy today, that could pay off in a big way. And then I took at late for hitters, Tyrone Taylor, which huge stake through the heart when Andrew McCutcheon sided with the Brewers, but that could still work out. Christian Yelich and Lorenzo Cain will not be staying on their feet for very long, at least at the same time, probably. JD Davis and Dom Smith back to back. Again, I expect there to be trades, at least one, if not both, at least at the time. Now it's looking maybe less likely, but I think one of the two definitely gets traded. I get some there. And then I took like Reed Detmers and then cashed out in a big way with Josh Harrison. Could be the nearly everyday starting second baseman for the White Sox. I was betting on him just going back to Oakland, the shell of Oakland, and maybe batting third for just like a quadruple A team. But I like taking shots in situations like this and leagues like this, where you want to shoot for the moon a little bit. And if it doesn't work out, you just kind of move on, because even though it is a 15-team league, at that point in the draft, at least hitter wise, there's no really sure thing. So you might as well shoot for the moon as far as narratives go.
Yeah, one thing I tried not to do was to overspend for a big Miles Straw, and I had an opportunity in the 9th round to take Miles Straw, and I was debating it, but I didn't want to do that. Instead, I took Ahmed Rosario, who personally I'm not in love with, although he was the top guy on my projections board. So a top guy, he fits my profile. I don't want to go full on, I'll take 15 steals. I don't need to get the 30. I pieced together, 15 from Baez, 15 steals from India, a couple from Soto, a couple here, a couple from Happ. I like that build better than going for the 30, which is funny. I could have taken Straw because I happen to have taken Joey Gallo later, which is an adventure in and of its own. My team, it's funny. I took Gallo. I also took Gary Sanchez, and oh boy, I didn't believe I would take that. I did get a lot of average at the top. I mean, Juan Soto, Aaron Judge at the very top. Mitch Garver, my other catcher, who is an average guy, balances it out. Maybe I'm a little bit light on average, but yeah, listen, you take what the room was available. Gallo was by far the highest value at the point, and I say, all right, I have Soto to balance him out. I'll take the 40 homers. Sometimes you got to do that. You take what the room hands you is really the message on draft. So value. That's how I do it. And in the very end, take whoever you want. Take your shots. All right, that will do it for part 1 of our episode with Matt Williams. On our next show, we'll talk about what to look for in spring training your mailbag, and an extended injury report by Ruvain. Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.